Welcome this evening to the Vote.ja question time with today the Connétable candidates for St Mary. So we have Mike Feller, welcome Mike, and David Johnson. Good evening. Pleased to meet you. So everybody at home, this is your opportunity to ask your candidates your questions. They will have 1 minute each in which to answer them, and we'll be taking it in turns to start the questions between them. Please try to keep your questions so that both candidates can answer them. We also would prefer it if you would say who you are and where you're from, and obviously we will also try to prioritise questions which are from the parish, but get your questions in now. The candidates are both sitting here waiting to hear from you. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to get started on you both. How will you represent and make yourself available to parishioners? That refers to you, Mike.
Well, the first thing I'll do is base myself in the parish office. I need to get my feet under the table and explore all the material that is there to enable me to talk to parishioners. Beyond the parish office, I need to look at ways of gauging public opinion on events and matters within the parish. I thought long and hard about this, and I think there's a way of improving the way we have a discourse with parishioners. The church box is hardly fit for the 21st century. Instead, we should be looking at emailing parishioners to disclose the kind of questions that they need to answer to enable us to understand better the way they feel about any given issue.
Okay, thank you. David?
Not stealing Mike's words, but his first part of his answer is exactly mine, and my hustings speech says so. Part myself at Parish Hall during the normal working hours of the parish office to be available to the public, and also available to the honorary officers, the procureurs and everyone else, so you're immediately on hand to deal with those things. And I think the actual presence of the constable there will hopefully lead a revitalisation of the parish hall. Also, I have in mind that at the moment there's not much discourse or engagement regarding political matters, whether they're parish ones or states, and I am proposing that after our formal parish assemblies, we might adjourn to have something a little less formal, maybe with a glass of wine if it's allowed, so that parishioners can open up and discuss these things. Otherwise, we are members just get told how they want us to vote the day before.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and we've got questions coming in, so everybody at home, please do get your questions in to your candidates for St Mary's Connétable. And Mary has asked, could the candidates please explain what they have done for St Mary in recent years? And that will go first to you, David.
It's a question one often gets asked at deputy hustings, and the answer is probably not enough. But on the deputy side, the deputy is not responsible for administration, and I think it's healthy for him not to get involved in administration of the parish. That said, I've had 2 terms as deputy. I've done a lot for the parish on the island through panels, etc. More locally, I have argued for, in the recent quarry debate, I have championed the preservation of fields, and on a lighter note, I have stood guard over the St Mary's Antiques Fair overnight to save a lot of money for the benefit of charities.
Thank you. Mike?
I moved to St Mary 14 years ago. I've thrown myself into parish life from the very beginning. I've been the editor of the previous St Mary magazine called The Communique, and the last 4 years, more recently I've taken up the St Mary Matters, which is the current St Mary magazine. I was involved with what I think was the very last big social event in St Mary, the 70th anniversary of the Liberation, which is, I chaired the committee that organised it. I'm now the chairman of the Youth and Community Centre. I've been there for 4 years. It's positively thriving at the moment. It's never been so busy. The link up with the party crew means that children's parties are happening there every weekend. It really is going like a bomb. And beyond that, I've done all sorts of work. I'm on the St Mary's Community Facebook presence, and I was on the committee of the latest Liberation celebrations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, get your questions in. Juliet Galachon has asked her the next question. She's also from St Mary, which is good. In the past, constables have generally tried to leave behind some improvement in the parish public realm. For example, the community centre or the network of footpaths. What would your legacy project be, and how would you mitigate the cost to ratepayers? That will go first to you, Mike.
Well, I've got 4 years to sort that out. I haven't actually got a particular project in mind. I'm inclined to think that the footpath, if you remember, the footpath project was dealt with quite hostility. There was quite a lot of hostility towards it in the beginning, and by the end, it's now used and it's well thought of throughout the parish, and it's been an incredible bonus, really. My legacy programme, I'd like to think that that would be inspired by something that the parishioners come up with during the time. I would like, for instance, to have a village green sorted out. I would like to create a community cafe. All these things, though, are relatively difficult to organise because all the detail needs to be put together. And I'm kind of thinking that I need parish support for these things, and only then will I be able to pursue them and then look for the funding thereof.
Thank you. David?
That's a difficult one, and obviously I'm aware that the questioner was responsible for a cycle path and follow that if we can. I would like to think there is room for some form of environmental addition, whether it's a small ward or not a youth centre, but some sort of cabin for the youth, which has been suggested to me, where they have their own area away from adults. Again, like Mike, I would have to work on that. And back to the point about cost, it is going to be difficult to fund something without increase of rates unless we can ask for the generosity of parishioners, which is what we'd have to do.
Okay, thank you. And there's more people joining us, so I'm just going to move that camera slightly. But please do get your questions in to your Connétable candidates for St Mary's. Now is your opportunity. There's a Q&A box on the screen for you to use. Now, one of the questions is that there's been some difficulties in the parish in the last couple of years. How would you ensure that you will work collaboratively with all the parish officials and obviously with the deputies as well?
I don't know the history of what has gone on. One hears rumours, but I don't personally see it as a problem. I've been in the States for 2 terms. I work on panels. I have my own scrutiny officer, and I think all concerned, and the fact that I am invited to panels shows that I'm very much a team player. As I said at the outset, having based myself at the parish hall on day one, I would expect and welcome the likes of the honoraries, the road traffic, the roads committee to come and see me, and indeed the procureurs. I mean, we are, after all, running what is almost a mini business as a parish, and financial discipline is required, and that must not be lost sight of. I also like to establish greater links with the church, which has been going through a difficult time at the moment.
Thank you. Mike?
There clearly have been difficulties. The turnover in parish secretaries, the turnover in the number of procureurs over the last 4 years has made life very difficult. And what the parish hall needs, without a shadow of a doubt, is some kind of continuity. There's a new secretary to be appointed, a new procureur to be appointed. It is a situation that needs to be resolved, and I think my skill is team playing. And I think if once I get into the chair and build that sort of network of support around me, then I think St Mary's Parish Hall will be a very different beast, and hopefully will take us into the next 4 years feeling much more confident than we have done over the last 4.
Okay, thank you both. Don't forget to get your questions in now to the candidates. Next one, which is picking up a little on you both talked about working collaboratively. What other skills and experience would you bring to the role of Connétable? That goes first to you, Mike, doesn't it?
What other skills? Well, I'm a people person. I like dealing with people. I've met a lot of people on the doorstep, talked to them at length, and it's quite astonishing how once you get people to relax, you can involve them in all sorts of ideas and projects, which I hope to bring out in the future. One of which is a sort of a social support community of ad hoc committee of people who are prepared to give them of themselves, a little or a lot, depending on the nature of the event that we're looking at. And I think I can bring all that out. And my role really will be to actually assess the individual's needs and put it against those that are able to supply some kind of help and support.
Thank you, David.
Well, before entering politics, I was a lawyer for some 40 odd years, both as partner and principal. That involves running one's own practice. That involves financial discipline, getting on with all sorts of layers and calibre of staff. And like Mike, I am a people person. I got on well, retained my secretaries, and again, I think that in the last year or so, when there have been movements within the states and scrutiny panels, etc., the ones I have been on have been very stable, and I think that people do like working with me, and I'm happy to take credit for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Moving on now, let's quick fire questions to you both. But David Tones has asked, would the candidates back the hospital project? Obviously, one of the big issues that people are talking about at the moment, hospital. Remaining, and would you back remaining where it has been decided to be cited, or would you like the new States Assembly to revisit this decision? And that goes first to you, David.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I was in the later stages of the last Parliament. I was on the scrutiny panel of our hospital project. It should have been dealt with a long time ago. Back to the basic question, I fear that it will be too much of a U-turn to go back on the Overdale project we have now. What I do want to happen is that the cost side is reined in. One of the questions we raised in scrutiny was as to the cost. Our own advisors said that in the scale of things, the cost for a project of that size wasn't too great. They couldn't understand why the project was of that size. And I think it does need to be honed down. We don't need a world-class hospital. We want a hospital fit for Jersey, and that is enough.
Thank you. Mike?
When I came into this race, I was of the mind that, okay, the hospital site selection has been a fiasco. The cost has been multiplied from 400 million to 800 million, taking into account the cost of construction. It's going to go over $1 billion without a shadow of a doubt. And on the doorstep, not a single person that I've met has actually said they thought Overdale was the right site. It's unanimous. It's the wrong site. I am now beginning to think that maybe we do have to rethink this whole business. And I think with the new government, that is, if it is a new government, depending on who's elected, obviously, then there has to be one last final look at whether we've done it the right way around. People's Park was the right site, and that's the one that I think eventually should be the one for the hospital.
Okay, thank you. Now, there's been a couple of other hot potato topics in these elections, and one of them is housing, of course. What would your plans in the parish be to solve that housing crisis without losing agricultural land? And that goes first to you, Mike.
Well, we've had this difficulty facing us from the very beginning. We had two sites that were up for the island bridging plan. One of them has gone forward. I was quite happy with that. It's the one next to the development already at Le Jardin de Home. The other one was on the field alongside Lavert Roux, and that was a much bigger scheme. But the problem with that is nobody knew what the parishioners thought. We had the constable on one hand saying he had full support of the parish. We had David saying that he had a mailbox full of people against it. And we need a new way of actually assessing how parishioners think about these big issues. We can't just rely on parish assemblies. Only 30 people turn up, the same 30 people. We need to get these issues debated on a much wider basis. And then I think we come to decisions between ourselves rather than simply doing it on that divided basis.
Okay, thank you. David?
I agree partly on that. My own view is that, well, there was a formal committee authorised by the Parish Assembly to identify sites. It apparently did, and came forward I'm not sure it came forward recommendations, but it never went to the Parish Assembly. The point of that committee was to recommend to the Parish Assembly, and Mike's quite right. There should have been a big meeting, and we have a record of turning out for meetings if there is a major issue to be done. That's the general point. It is a problem. We meet this on the doorstep, on one hand we want to keep our green fields, on the other hand we need more houses. But I would say that we have always taken the view that we are keeping green fields not for the benefit just of St Mary residents, it's for the benefit of the whole island who wish to come and see us at weekends.
Okay, thank you. And there's more people joined us, I've noticed, online, so please do get your questions in. This is your opportunity to ask both candidates for St Mary Connétable. One of the other things that's also been on the agenda during the elections, which has come up frequently, has been the changes to the electoral system. Do you agree with that, or would you like to see senators and the island-wide mandate returned? That goes first to you, David.
No, I didn't agree with it. I voted for most of the amendments. The final one, it's something which kept coming back to us in the States every 6 months or so. I think that my own view, might have a different view, is that most St Mary residents think they're being disenfranchised on the senatorial front. They need an island-wide mandate to vote at least for some senators, if not the total lot. They also feel that in the parish system, we now have 3 parishes to vote together, that it is unlikely that a resident of St Mary will ever be that representative, because people will vote according to their parish loyalties, and that saddens me. And also there are other problems, historical ones, that the previous deputy used to be a trustee of various internal trusts. That has to go now, because we can't expand into other parishes.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, too many deputies, not enough chiefs. I agree with David. The residents of St Mary, the ones I've spoken to on the doorstep, feel they're being disenfranchised, both in regard to the senators and in regard to the deputy, because they feel, just like David, there'll never be another deputy who lives in St Mary. And I mean, I was encouraged by what one of the candidates for the deputy of St Mary said, that she'd be looking at a constituency office, which would enable at least some sort of debate amongst the deputies and the constables. But I think, without a doubt, by the end of the 4 years, there will be a new political system, the constituency boundaries will be redrawn, and I think senators were back. 6 out of the 7 candidates for deputy all thought that the senators should be returned, and the only one who didn't thought we should give it a year and see how it works.
Okay, thank you. Right. Moving on to slightly more parochial issues, although it's an island-wide issue for that one. Speeding is always brought up in these things. Do you have any plans or ideas how you can improve the situation for speeding in the parish? I'll go first to you, Mike.
Well, speeding is a big issue, and it's not just the 2 main roads, La Rue and La Rue des Buttes. It's I'm aware of speeding problems. People talk about La Chef Rue and there's a wrap run through to St Lawrence. Down in Grève de Lec, they're worried about the 40 mile. It's one of the very few 40 mile an hour limits in St Mary, and they want that reduced to 30. And I fully support them in that, because it is really quite. I think they come down this hill from St Juan and go up the other side, thinking they can go just as fast. But on the ground, there are 2 things really. One is the speed calming that was introduced has worked, but I'm not sure the perception always follows the reality. Since the speed calming was introduced, there have been far fewer road accidents. I think about 4, and none of those involve speeding. However, there is a perception on the ground. If you're walking along those narrow walkways, it is really worrying when a car comes past you, even at 20 miles an hour. It feels like it's going like a bat out of hell. And I need to sort that out.
Thank you. Thank you. David?
I think it's a lot better than it was some years ago. I spoke to the Honourable Police. Yes, I think there is speeding within the 20 miles an hour limit, but it is rarely on average above 26, 27. I'm not saying that is capable of being absorbed, but it is an improvement. There are certain pockets where it is a very long 20 mile an hour speed limit going through the village, and people accelerate before they're out of it. And I've had an email even over the weekend that coming in from St John, there is the road obviously goes from St Mary to St John, or whichever way around you want to do it, and it goes from 40 to 20, and that seems to be anachronistic. I mean, it goes straight from a lower speed limit like that to a big one, and also the green lanes running off the 40 mile line as well. There needs to be some consistency, but we have 13 road traffic areas in the island, and it's difficult to get a agreement.
Okay, thank you very much both. And so still time, got a few more minutes left, so if you want to get your questions in to your candidates, please do so now. You can use the Q&A box on your screen. I'm going to ask you now about the other kind of really big issue, obviously it's affecting a lot of people in Jersey, not everybody, but a lot of people, and that's the cost of living crisis and fears of what's going to be happening coming up. How do you think the parish has any kind of a role to help alleviate this, maybe help people who are struggling with the cost of living? That goes first to you, David.
I'm sure there are very charitable people in the parish who want to help. Only today I was speaking to someone who was reminding me that at one stage people were giving things to parish hall so the less fortunate could go and get them, but that's an ad hoc situation. Short of the parish hoping to encourage homegrown produce and enough fields for that, I would hope, at lower rates, which the locals will buy into. It is difficult to do it on a parish-only basis, I think. But except, of course, the parish system ought to look after those who are less able to afford and make sure they don't go without. Beyond that, I think it's difficult to work on a parish basis.
Thank you, Mike.
No, I agree with David. I don't think this is a parish responsibility. I went to the supermarket today and bought a can of dog food, which normally cost me 47, and it cost me 68 pence. I don't know what's happening. The cost of living crisis is only going to get worse. And I think the measures to alleviate that are much more government-based. I think those on income support should get extra help. Those on the margin between income support and tax threshold, they should also get community support bonus. That should be increased. That's the way to deal with it. And I don't think the parish can really help in any real sense.
Okay, so you obviously, as if you're elected, would have a vote in say. Would you vote to take GST or food, which a lot of people are calling for? That goes first to you, Mike.
I don't think I would, to be honest. I do have this idea that maybe we could take GST over locally produced food. It seems to me that we ought to give our growers a leg up, but I've looked into this quite hard, and in New Zealand, for instance, which is the sort of leading light in all of this, they've decided that it doesn't work to actually take GST off specific items. It's far easier, and there are better ways of actually raising the kind of money that we're talking about other than through GST.
Okay, thank you, David.
I'm inclined to agree with Mike, actually. When I first entered the political arena, GST was coming in with a great deal of opposition. The GST, or its equivalent elsewhere, at 5% is about the lowest in the world. If you start having different rates, it is costly to administer. It is not costly to administer at the moment. It's an efficient way of tax. If GST did come off food, I sense that would have to be recouped by higher GST going on to other things. So I'm inclined to think help those in need by other ways rather than across the board.
Okay, thank you both. Well, it's time for 2 more questions now. Do you think that constables should hold other positions within government? It goes first to you, David.
Yes, if they're able to. In the last government, we had Constable of St Clement holding the position of Home Affairs Minister. We have the Constable of St Juan being Deputy Financial Services Minister, and other examples. I think the question, or put the question that way, it is, can the constable concerned afford the time, or can his parish spare him the time to do another job? And I spoke with constables in the States before we broke up, as it were, and most of them, including one who is a chair of a scrutiny panel, says yes, constables should, with a well-run parish, be able to carry a big job. So I think they should. I doubt that a constable could carry the job of a minister, but assistant minister, certainly.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
I think I disagree because I am parish focused. That's where I think my role is going to be played. I've seen predecessors. They get elected, they talk about being constables, and they go into the States, and somehow they seem to be swallowed by a vast machine. And suddenly they're talking about the scrutiny panels and all the rest of it. And I really feel that's a distraction. And I think the situation in St Mary needs a constable who's forceful and vibrant and there in place. And I think as little time as possible. Clearly, we are now the representative in terms of, without a deputy actually living in St Mary. But I think the constable's role in the next 4 years is going to be much more heavily involved around the parish. And I think taking on extra office is not helpful.
Okay, thank you. And the final question to you both. If you were elected, what would be the first 3 things that you would do? So what would you prioritise if you were elected? And that goes first to you, Mike, doesn't it?
First thing I'll do is get my feet under the table. I suspect if I'm elected, I face a steep learning curve. The second thing is to get the parish office organised. I'm worried about the continuity, the constant churning of secretaries and the other offices, the procureurs. Thirdly, I would be looking at finding a way of gauging public opinion in the parish so that we actually are talking to parishioners as a whole rather than the 30 that turn up at the parish assemblies. But overall, my priority is renewing that spirit of community endeavour, trying to get parishioners to talk to each other, trying to make their lives better by putting on parish events, by enabling them to look after other parishioners. And that community spirit is what I'm all about. That's what I will be working hardest for.
Thank you. And David?
As soon as in the first instance, I need to find out what's been going on in the parish hall. I've been in as a deputy. That's nothing to do with running the parish. I need to know what goes on, what timelines are to look at, the financial accounting position again, and outstanding issues a roads committee piece might have. In addition, I would harness or get together the new deputies for the 3 parishes to make sure that we are going to have a routine where they're going to appear at the parish halls to meet with the constable, meet with parishioners, and get them to understand that St Mary does need a voice, and we were looking to them to bolster our own voice in the assembly, because unless we do, I fear that there's a threat of the constables going under as well.
Okay, thank you very much both. And thank you everybody for listening at home. You've been listening to your 2 Connétable candidates for St Mary's. That is Mike Fennell, thank you very much, and David Johnson. Thank you both for joining us. And if you haven't registered to vote, which I'm sure you have until midday tomorrow, so let anybody else know that they can register to vote. And pre-poll is also open in town if you need to. We can get all the information, of course, on vote.je. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you both.